welcome back. We're starting a new series this month called Waitlisted. Have you ever had to wait for something in your life? Now, I know you have. It feels like all of us are waiting right now. We're waiting for COVID to be over. We're waiting to be able to go back and hang out with our friends again. We're waiting for life to restart. And it's so hard. Remember when this all started? I'm recording this in the start of March, and it's actually almost 1 year to when all of this began. And at first it was like, it's just gonna be like a month or two to get through this. I remember when we were planning things at the church and we were like, yeah, by June we're all gonna be together and we'll have a big reopening celebration. And here we are in March, and yet we're still waiting. It feels like it's been forever. And waiting is really, really hard, especially when it's something important. Have you ever had to wait for something like, how about waiting for the bathroom? You know, like if you're at a sports game or a concert or something like that, and there's an intermission and everyone goes to the bathroom at once, and there's that huge lineup that goes all of the way out, and you really have to go, and you're just standing there like, I can't take this much longer, but you still have to wait. Or maybe it's the wait of a long car drive where you're going and you're just like, are we there yet? Are we there yet? And you're just so overwhelmingly bored. Maybe it's something that you're really looking forward to, like Christmas. And you know, as a little kid, I was so excited. Oh, what am I gonna get this year? And it just seemed like Christmas couldn't come soon enough. All of us have to wait. Now, there was an experiment, a very famous experiment called the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment. And in it, researchers gave a bunch of little kids a marshmallow, and they told them that they could eat this marshmallow now, but if they could wait, then in 10 minutes they would come back and they would instead give them 2 marshmallows to eat. And they looked to see which kids would just could wait to get 2 marshmallows, and which kid would just gobble the marshmallow immediately. And the theory of this study was, and what came out of it, was the idea that the kids who could wait for the second marshmallow did better all the way through. They followed them as they went on through their life, and they said that the ones who waited had much better grades, had much better, everything in their life kind of went better. They succeeded better in their jobs, their careers, they had better marriages, because being able to wait was an important thing. Now, this was a famous study for many years, but as they went back and dug into it, it became very controversial, and they began to realize that maybe the data wasn't telling them what they thought it was. You see, they assumed that the reason that the kids who ate the marshmallow ate it was because they thought those kids just didn't have the patience to wait. But as they dug down a bit deeper, what they found out is many of the kids who ate the marshmallow right away did it because they didn't trust that the random stranger who came into the room and promised them a marshmallow was actually going to give them a second marshmallow when they got back. And because they didn't trust them, they decided to go ahead and get what they could right now, because what was coming in the future couldn't be relied on. Now, maybe those kids were onto something. Watch this video clip of a magician actually doing a version of the Stanford Marshmallow Experiment.
The famous Stanford Marshmallow Experiment tests children's self-control.
You have a choice. You can eat it now, totally cool, or if you can wait till I get back, I'll give you a second marshmallow.
I can do it.
You can wait 10 minutes?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Oh, by the way, if you want, you can use that cup to cover it up so you don't have to look at it. Good luck.
Okay.
Researchers showed that by putting a marshmallow in front of a kid and daring him not to eat it, you could tell if one day they'd be the next Steve Jobs or the next Steve Gutenberg.
Oh.
Now, in the original experiment, they just waited to see what happened, but I don't have the patience for that.
beautiful to watch. All right. Oh, you ate it. That's okay.
I didn't eat it. I lifted the cup and it was gone.
How'd you do?
Good.
Was it good?
Yeah. After I slipped the cup, it just disappeared.
What disappeared?
The marshmallow.
Would you like another one?
Yeah, it just disappeared.
Oh, buddy, here. You want to eat this one? It's okay. Here, eat this one. You can eat this one. It disappeared like magic?
Yeah.
Well, eat this one. Tell me how it tastes.
Good.
Is it good?
Well, we made a kid cry, so I'd say phase 1 was a success.
And we're back. You see, they had reason not to trust things. Their marshmallows kept disappearing. Now, a lot of times in life, this is what my relationship with God has been. God says things and he says, I love you, but I don't trust that God really has good things for me. And when things get hard in my life, I decide I'm just going to do it on my own. I don't need to wait on God. I'm not much different from most of the people in the Bible. So over the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at the stories of people in the Bible who were asked by God to wait for something and how they dealt with that waiting. The first story we're going to look at this week is the story of Abraham and Sarah. Very famous people in the Bible. Abraham became the founder of the nation of Israel and the Jewish people. And his wife Sarah was the mother of the nation. But before that happened, they were just two everyday people living in a different country called Ur. At the time, Abraham's name was Abram and Sarah's name was Sarai. And those names were significant. The shortened names were just kind of everyday names, but the names God gave them were actually part of a promise. He changed their names. He made them a promise. He said, you will be the father of many, father of nations. And Sarah, you will be a princess. You will be the mother of many people. Here's the thing. God had promised them that if they followed him, they would have a child who would carry on things for them and would be the founder of a nation. But they were old and they didn't have any kids. They were past the age when they thought they were going to be able to have kids. In fact, when God first made the promise and said, you will be the parents of a mighty nation, when Sarah heard it, she laughed and said, at my age, that's impossible. She might have been in her 50s at that point. And, they didn't have things like in vitro fertilization back then. So that was just impossible. It could never happen. But God told them, yes, it's going to happen. But they waited and they waited and they waited and they waited and they waited. And it didn't happen. And suddenly their 50s turned into their 60s, maybe even older. And the promise seemed like it was just out of nowhere. And so eventually they decided, well, maybe God's promise was that this was going to happen, but we need to, help God along with his promise. So they came up with an idea. And Sarah had a servant, actually a slave that she owned. And she said, here's the deal. I'm going to give you my slave and you go sleep with her and get her pregnant. And that's going to be the child that God promised us. How do you think the slave girl felt about that? Her name was Hagar. And so they went ahead with this plan and Abraham got her pregnant and she gave birth to a son named Ishmael. And suddenly Sarah, who was the one who came up with this idea, became really jealous that this woman had a child and she didn't. So she started to beat her and make her life miserable until finally Hagar ran away into the desert, willing to, while still pregnant, and said, I'd rather die than stay in this place. An angel from the Lord showed up and said, no, don't worry. I see you and I am taking care of you. Go back and I will protect you. And so Hagar went back and gave birth to a son. But Ishmael still wasn't who was promised. God cared about Ishmael and cared about Hagar, but it still wasn't the promise that was made. And finally, after many years of waiting, Sarah actually became pregnant. It might have been in her 90s that she was pregnant. And she gave birth to a son named Isaac. God kept his promise. But it was so much longer than anyone thought it was going to take. And Abraham and Sarah, as they waited, they started to not trust. And because the waiting took so long, they decided God's never going to show up. I'm going to do this my way. There's lots of times in our life when things happen and we don't understand. We're waiting for change. We're waiting for COVID to go away. We're waiting for justice. We're waiting to be old enough to do the things we know we can do and should do. And God promises to be with us in all of them. But if we don't trust God, then when we're waiting, what we decide is that God isn't real. He's not there. He doesn't care about us. And when we make those decisions, we often walk away. I know in my own life, that's how I felt when I was in junior high and I didn't understand why the things around me were happening. I became so angry at God that I left him. And I made a lot of dumb choices in those years that I walked away from God. And as we learned in our last series, God never gave up on me. He continued to love me. But it's interesting because many of those experiences that I had in those years, when I came back to God, God used those in a way that has made me a better youth pastor. Many of the stories that I tell now in these videos came from those years, and it's my understanding and empathy of that time that allows me to reach out to other people. So even though I felt like I was waiting for nothing, God had a plan even in the midst of all of that and found a way to use all of it for good. So maybe you're waiting right now. I know I am still waiting for COVID to be over, and I don't understand why it's taking so long or what could come out of this. But what we know is God is faithful. He's faithful even when we don't understand what's happening. He's faithful even when we don't know why. He is so much bigger than we are. And we can always trust in God, and He will be faithful to that trust, even when we can't see it. So we all are going to hit seasons of our lives where we're waiting for things and we don't understand what's going on. But just like the kids who trusted adults more to wait for that second marshmallow succeeded better in their lives, when we trust in God, even when we don't understand, then God brings good things out of even the hardest things in our life, because God is always faithful. All right, here's some small questions to discuss in your small groups. Number one, what are you waiting for right now? With COVID, what are you waiting, are you most looking forward to doing when this all finishes? Number two, do you find it easy to trust people when they tell you things? Or are you someone who tends to be more skeptical at what people promise? What do you think the strengths or weaknesses of that is? And number three, do you have an easy time trusting God? Or are you someone who questions God a lot and finds it very difficult to trust that there are good things even in the midst of this? All of us have our experiences, and wherever you're at, that's okay. God has space for all of us. Discuss these things in our group, and I'll see you back next week.